Hey, Ryan.
Yeah.
You are my
Sunshine, my only sunshine.
What the hell are you doing?
Welcome to AT Banter, the podcast where we discuss anything and everything regarding the world of assistive technology. With our hosts, Steve Barkley, Rob Minot, and Ryan Fleury. Now, let's banter.
All right, and hey, welcome to a little thing we like to call AT Banter.
Banter!
Do we really like to call it AT Banter? Or do we just call it AT Banter? You get enjoyment out of calling it AT Banter?
I do. I get the tingles.
Oh, excellent.
It's Monday in my head, Friday in my pants.
That's right.
He's got the tingles.
That's right. Okay, let's turn that down. Okay, excellent. All right, well, I am Groot. And joined today by Rocket Raccoon.
Howdy.
And Drax the Destroyer.
I will kill you all.
But really, no, I am Rob Minot. And with me is Ryan Fleury.
Hi.
And Steve Barkley.
I will kill you all.
What are we doing today?
We are talking to Ben Schögler from Skoog.
Schögler.
Is it Schögler?
I think it's Schögler. I was listening to another podcast he was on, and although we'll have to double check with him once he's on.
Okay.
I think Daisy's killing somebody.
Daisy's locked up. So did you watch the debates last night?
No, but I saw enough memes on the way in that gave me an idea of how it went. But so, what was your?
It was pretty entertaining. Trump was Trump. Hillary was Hillary. I don't think there was really any. There was no big surprise. There was no major gaffe. But the fact checkers just had a heyday.
Oh, is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Because they were just throwing stuff around.
Trump was lying. It doesn't make any difference to his followers. They're going to vote for him no matter what he says. But,
right.
He said things like, Hillary said, said that he had said that global warming was a conspiracy by the Chinese to make U.S. Production less competitive. He goes, so I never said that. So, today his tweet is all over the place where he actually said that, exactly that. And his campaign has deleted that tweet from his Twitter timeline now, but I mean, it's out there already.
Yeah, they need to realize the internet's forever.
Yeah.
The internet never forgets.
Yeah.
We're very happy to have with us Ben Schögler, who is the creative director and co-founder of SkoogMusic.
Yeah.
Hi there.
Thanks for and where actually are you right now?
I'm in Edinburgh right now. That's where we're based, up in Scotland, and it's about 7 o'clock in the evening, and it's just starting to actually get dark here. But it's been a lovely autumn day.
Nice. I quite enjoyed Edinburgh when I was there years ago. I was terribly amused by the old city, new city thing when your new city was older than our country.
Yeah, no, there's quite a lot of that. Did you come for the festival or just to visit? Or
no, we were just we kind of drove around the UK for a while. We started out down in London, then went through Wales, took the ferry across into Ireland, went into Northern Ireland, and then took the ferry back across again, and then drove over to Edinburgh.
That's quite a drive. Yeah. So what was your top pick from Edinburgh then?
I really liked the Royal Mile.
I used to work on the Royal Mile. It was my first job, was working on the Royal Miles in the. We call them, I suppose it was tartan tourist shops, but selling all of the kind of bits of tartan and kind of little souvenirs in souvenir shops. I suppose that was my first working job. Was selling miniature castles and bagpipes and whatnot on the Royal Mile back in the early 90s.
Nice. Yeah, we did a walking tour with a little wee lady who marched us around that town at an incredible pace. She was a ferocious wee thing.
Yeah, no, the smaller They've got a lot of bite to them, I'm sure.
Let's sort of step back and just talk about the Skoog itself, and just give people who may be listening who don't know what the Skoog is at all, and just give them a base overview of what the Skoog is.
So Skoog it's a musical instrument, and it was created from a research project back in 2006 that was a kind of combination of researchers coming together. It was the end of a long line of research to create a musical instrument for those unable to play traditional instruments, with a specific focus on children. So it's a piece of technology that was created specifically to address the needs of people who find it difficult to learn or play a more traditional instrument. And actually, the scope of Skoog, and it really impacts on what I'm quite passionate about in terms of, I think, accessibility, is that it's not necessarily about disability, although we did work a lot with different populations of students with varying levels of needs and sensory processing challenges and these kind of things. But really, it's about, accessibility is about making it accessible to everyone. If you're going to be inclusive, you need to include as many people as possible. And that's really kind of at the heart of Skoog. So it's a musical instrument that is easy to play, easy to learn, but specifically for children to engage in through play, because that's how we learn. And we learn better if we can get our hands on things, make some sounds, and enjoy ourselves and have some fun more appropriately. So we did this research across the UK and Scotland in various schools and prisons and hospitals and all kinds of places where people may face challenges in terms of being creative and accessing music. And we ended up after 2 years with this strange cube, is, for want of a better word, that's what it is, this kind of cubic thing with kind of colored buttons on each side, or sort of domes poking out. And that was our new musical instrument. And a lot of people thought that's a bit strange. But what we experienced in working with all the different students and teachers and working was really having to go and think about music differently, think about interacting and being creative with music differently, and thinking about what it is that we need. What are the core kind of requirements? So the one thing was to be able to be expressive, and those have a level of control that allowed you to be creative around that, but it had to be physically accessible as well. So, there's a range of different things to incorporate. So we ended up with a soft tactile cube, which connects to a computer, or it can connect to an iPad, the newer version, and it allows you to create and control sound. And the important thing about it is it allows you to create and control sound without any previous musical knowledge or skill. But it still allows you to grow and learn and be expressive and actually play it to a high level.
And what exactly is your background?
My background, I'm a psychologist and a musician. I would like to say musician first, but it's psychology that has paid the bills, so to speak. So my background is in developmental psychology. When I started Edinburgh back in the 90s, I'm only interested in music. I've always played. I've been in bands and been a performer. And the only way of dealing with the degree that I'd signed up for was to find out how I could study music through it and engage in that. And where I found myself was at a real crossroads and a kind of creative melting point in thought at that time around early development and motherese and early communication. And Professor Colwyn Trevarthen, who is a real luminary, just a total inspiration. He was prolific in this area, and at that time in the kind of early 90s in Edinburgh, it was a real hotspot for what they were looking at with early development and how we communicate and develop socially and learn language. And they were using music as a metaphor to talk about these things. And I began working with them, and I said, well, it's not a metaphor. What the kids are doing here, what the babies are doing, what the mother's doing, this is music. This is improvised jazz, essentially, but not as you know it, not using the chord structures or the rhythms that you know, but using smiles and giggles and tickles and glances and sounds and gurgles and body noises and all these kind of things. So it was a kind of real multi-sensory ballet that was going on, but you could see the interaction. It was like watching a great trio or a great band playing together, or a duet. And so I began working in this area of developmental research, using music as a tool really to explore deeper the kind of psychological development. And then how we learn to communicate using these essentially musical skills. And music is built on those skills. Music is like a celebration of how we share time with other human beings. We've evolved at such a point that we can create art with it. But the fundamental skills are absolutely core to all of us in all that we do. And it's not just about sound, but it's really physically as well in our bodies. And there's a really important, we should mention that later about when talking about those with physical challenges, how that kind of comes to play. But so I began working in this area, and we developed a whole lot of research, and we were all doing very well for it and everything, and all thought it was all very good. But we sat down in 2002 and we were like, well, we understand all of this research about how we learn to communicate and how it's really musicality that's at the heart of it. But the question was, what can we do with that? How can we use this knowledge to actually do something positive to help? And that's where the idea of creating an instrument that really was founded on these principles and really explored that core musicality and supported it so that kids could start engaging in music in a kind of instrumental way earlier, and also support those who find it difficult and really be creative. And so that's where my background is. And I was part of this kind of core team who then started applying for funding, research, and going to different councils. And that took a while. And in 2006, Professor Nigel Osborne, who's an amazing, again, another real inspiration. And it's just, I think, Edinburgh was one of these crossing points in a lot of different areas. There's Professor Devarthan in early development, and Nigel was working he was part of setting up a charity War Child, and he was using music to help kids in areas of trauma and music therapy. And he was out in Bosnia and Herzegovina and that kind of Serbo-Croatian kind of conflict there, and he was creating operas with kids who were had been bombed, and it was just this, he was seeing music as this kind of great healing force and how it could lend in terms of therapy. And all that came together in this research project to say, well, let's create an actual thing. Let's try and use what we've learned. I was actually a lecturer in the Caribbean at the time. I'd left Edinburgh and was lecturing in developmental psychology in Barbados, which was a very nice gig.
Yeah.
And I came back when we finally got the funding, and we were like, well, look, this is a chance to do this. And what was really important about the research project, the core research project, was it was always about producing a commercial prototype. It couldn't be a simple, an academic research exercise. And the other thing that was really, really crucial and absolutely fundamental to hopefully, I feel, is the success of what we've done, is that it had to be a participatory design project, which meant that we had to go and work with our potential users. And so the initial focus was children with physical or learning difficulties, or those with special needs. And so we spent days, weeks, months working in schools all over Scotland and further afield, and just spending time in the classroom, spending time with kids, spending time with the teachers as well, trying to understand what we needed. And we took all kinds of fancy gadgets and gadgetry out there, and that was all cool. But it wasn't until we started putting, we noticed there were a lot of tactile, kind of multi-sensory toys, things that were malleable and were, things that would invite touch, either that were kind of squeezable or had a kind of fur or tactile kind of element, particularly. And one of our real focuses was people who were described as very hard to reach, who maybe have quite have autism or quite profound kind of communication disorders, and they seem to be really drawn to these kind of sensory toys. And we could talk a lot about why that is. So we began putting these sensors and these electronics and stuff, these fancy things, inside squeezy things. And that's when that was the breakthrough. That was the eureka. That was when we managed to connect with those guys that we had been trying so long to kind of engage. And it was just a complete light bulb. And from a psychology point of view, it just makes so much sense. And it's a very powerful and simple kind of medium through touch, in that human beings, our principal role, if you will, is to interact. Our main purpose, our design purpose, is to interact with other human beings. And other human beings are soft. We're squidgy. We're squidgy things. Right?
Some more than others.
Yeah, some more than others, but even the really buff ones, they still are squidgy, okay? It doesn't matter how much you work out, you're still malleable.
Yeah, I'm going to take your word for that, because I don't think going up to the gym and checking that out personally.
Well, it's something I always do in my lectures, but it is almost that core and simple, in that we're created to communicate through touch. We're designed to, organic matter, as it were, is soft to the touch. And when you think about nearly all technology, it's hard. Plastics, metals, clicky, clacky, not necessarily that inviting. When you touch it, you don't want to necessarily touch it more, unless you're thinking about smoother curves and these kind of things. But as soon as you make it squishy, it makes you want to squish it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And as soon as if you then connect that sensibly, and that's the difficult bit to sound in terms of control. And, we're still learning and we're still growing in that sense. But if you can make the interaction intuitive and sensible, so that when you squish, you create a sound, and that sound does something sensible as to how you're touching it, suddenly you have interaction and it's dynamic. So that was the other thing that was really important, is that it wasn't kind of switch trigger based. It had to be contingent, and kind of the squeezing had to make sense. So we had that, and then we started playing with different forms. And we often get asked, why the cube? Why a square? Why is it this really? Why does it really not look like any musical instrument? And it's because it's not like any musical instrument. But we played around with lots of different things, and the circle, the sphere is almost the most ergonomic form to hold with your hands. But there's also the fact that a lot of people that use Skoog, or that we were working with, don't necessarily use their hands to play it, but that's another thing. But the sphere, the circle, is easy to hold and to interact with. It invites kind of picking it up. It invites, bringing it to the body. But the flats, the square is such a simple form. So the sphere, we tried things on that, but it was very difficult to define physically different areas. How do you separate the notes on a sphere? How do you make it easy to navigate? How do you orient the sphere in such a way that it's, I know where you are on it, and these kind of things. So we started playing with different forms and shapes, and you could have more complex and less complex, polyhedrons. But the cube is a really robust kind of physical cognitive form. It's really easy to understand, and it's easy to understand just simply with your hands if you have low vision, and you can feel, each side is very distinct from each other, and the different dimensions. It's roughly hand-sized, a Skoog, because that is one of a large number of people do interact with their hands, and we don't want it to be. You want it to be so that you're really, each side is kind of separate from each other. So this kind of simple building block form is really easy and intuitive to grasp for many users. And the buttons that project from it are a play on the sphere. So it's really taking probably the two most simple forms, a square and a sphere, and combining them in a way that gives you a huge range of interaction possibilities, and invites, so the corners can be pinched, the edges can be plucked, you can press and stroke the flat sides, the buttons you can pinch and press. It's called affordances in psychology. It invites different actions. And so instead of just being a flat key on a keyboard that kind of just says, well, you can do one thing with me and that's it. Right. This just offers to you so many different things and suggests different things to do with it. And so you start touching it and playing with it, and that's when you begin to play and learn. So we released the first Skoog commercially in 2010, and it's now 2016, and we're on version 2.
So let me just step back and talk a little bit about the design. Was it a real technical challenge to given that it's a soft, malleable design, and not only that it's touch sensitive? Like, was that a hard thing to develop?
It was. So the tactile thing, we was. I suppose, and this is a frustration experienced by people we work with, I think, in the commercial sense. I'm not technically a designer. Obviously I'm a musician, a psychologist, but the psychology that I'm involved in reference to ecological psychology is kind of the core principles of design, in terms of how humans interact with other things. But I'm not a designer in terms of being able to make things from manufacture. So, we knew we wanted to do something soft and tactile, but it turns out that soft and tactile is quite difficult to control and manufacture. And at the same time, we were so clear that we needed to not have seam lines, because they would they would interrupt your joy and your interaction with it. Particularly if you're talking about someone who's non-verbal, you can't have bits that are poking out. It's got to make sense. It's got to feel right. And when you say to a manufacturer, and they're like, well, what's wrong with this? And they say, well, it just doesn't feel right. Then, you can imagine their frustration. And they're like, well, give me a number, give me a dimension. Right. And you're like, well, it's not the right, there are sure factors, they're called, in terms of tactility. But so, that was a real challenge, but we learned as we went. We were lucky. We found in the first instance, and we still make it, and it's still made in the UK, it's still made in Scotland. The first sort of partner we worked with, they made stress balls, so simple squeezy foam stress balls, and they were willing. Well, what happened was that they're an interesting firm. They used to make orthopedic shoes for elderly people, and the problem was that they were too good, so they lasted too long, so people only bought one pair. So they had to diversify, but they were very skilled in what they did with foam. And we found them, I can't remember exactly how, but just really, through the wonder of the internet. And we said, look, we've got this crazy idea. We want to make this thing. And they came up with a way of making it. And it was very expensive and very difficult. But the original Skoog and that was reflected in the original Skoog's price. Although, the software and things we evolved with it, we tried to build in as much value as we can. And it was still cheaper than some other devices that, do different things. But yeah, it was the tactility and the touch sensitiveness was difficult. There was an element in the first Skoog where we were able to move quite quickly because we used off-the-shelf electronics in terms of the sensors that are used in it. But that presents its own problems in terms of not being able to advance those in any way. And in the new Skoog, this type of sensor and the IP inside is all actually, we've created that from scratch. So that we can do more with it. Where the current hardware can do a lot more than it's doing, if you know what I mean. We're looking to keep releasing new additions to the software that add a functionality and stuff that we just wouldn't be able to do with the old version due to the kind of the hardware was locked down, as it were. So yeah, making it touch sensitive, it was imperative because of this kind of primacy of kind of touch and interactivity, but we were lucky to work with some really great partners, and I suppose serendipity in terms of the sensors that we were using, and it's also to do with the actual form, this cubic form. Actually, it's very simple technology. The cube itself is part of the technology in a way, if you like, because it actually creates the direction in which you interact and press with it. So it starts to create a directional force that then is almost funneled by the structure of the foam, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
So if it was just a squeezy ball, you would squeeze it and the whole thing would compress. Whereas because it's a square and you're forced to press on one side, then it only moves in one way, or it only moves in another, so it kind of defines how you interact with it. It offers you the opportunity to do that, but physically it kind of channels the force, if you like. And it works as a spring and in a way, and an amplifier, and that's useful in terms of doing the sensing. So again, I think it was working with the kids and then like almost bringing this idea of squeezable materials to us. And whilst they are challenging to work with, they actually bring a whole lot to the party in terms of creating different sensory kind of arrays.
When you talk about the sensors that are in the Skoog, what type of sensors are actually in there?
So the new Skoog has got, it uses a magnetic sensor. So it actually senses changes in magnetic field. That's fairly standard. And in the old Skoog, it was just more of a straight up physical. It was just sensing movement. So it's kind of not a strain gauge as such, but just displacement of parts within the Skoog, much like a joystick. Being moved, but a squishy one.
Is it a single sensor, or are there multiple sensors in there?
There in the current one there are multiple, and in the old one it was a sort of an array, but a single unit. It does create it's a property of using this kind of tactile material that then creates almost like there are lots of sensors in it to deliver this kind of array, but it's to do with it's a combination of the foam and the sensors that you use.
And so given that there's a software suite that goes along with the Skoog that allows you to do everything from sampling to just setting up notes on the different buttons. I guess when you were originally developing it, it was just meant to hook to a PC.
Yep.
But now with tablets, have you found that it's gotten even better because now it's a lot more portable?
Yeah, no, I mean the sort of growth of tablets in education. And so we really sort of, we launched in 2010, but we really kind of more got going by about 2012. And at that point is when tablets really kind of exploded in education, and particularly in special ed. Thinking about that as a focus. And, the portability and the different, the interactivity, accessibility, all those kind of things come to play. And also the wirelessness, particularly in a classroom where you've got a lot of different equipment, having something that you can just bring to hand and get access to through a touchscreen just is, it was paradigm shifting and groundbreaking and all these kind of things. And we knew then that, we really needed to make this thing wireless, and we need to make it connect to these devices. So at the moment, it is just on iOS, to tablet, iPad and iPhone, but we are working towards the Android connectivity and looking at a wider kind of space on that. It's just a matter of time and resources, but we are working on that. But yeah, the portability is great, and also it's there. The environment now for development with different types of apps, whether it's for Chrome or for Android or for iOS, stuff is moving quickly. People are doing a lot more development. It's much easier for people to create, bespoke solutions or create, creative kind of outputs. And that just makes a really inspiring and a really active kind of community where you can, things move quickly. You can request features from other developers, and there's more accessible content, not necessarily in an accessibility way, but just to everyone. There's so many more apps and different things, and the kind of app approach to software. And an app is just a program, like a program would run on a PC. But this idea of, apps are very much, often they're focused on doing one thing well, and I would say a good app is that, it has a clear task and you use it to do a job, and then for another job you use a different app, and it may be from the same suite or family, but they're quite focused, little packages, and that really helps you focus. So the whole environment in that is I think really great as a developer, and as a platform it affords you a lot in terms of support and the stuff that's available both for your users as well, in terms of content and different things to interact with, and a lot of these being free and low cost. And there's a problem around that in terms of a lot of people nowadays don't see why they should pay for software or why they should pay for apps, and that's difficult in terms of the kind of the businesses that are built around that. You have to maybe sell services or additional things because there is a mindset that apps should be free, or you should at least get a free version and these kind of things. But that's moving and changing as well, and that's just one of those challenges that we all have to face.
So initially, did you see it more as a developmental tool?
Initially, the core focus initially was as a tool for enabling orchestral inclusion. So quite a high goal. So to be able to enable a student who is unable to play a violin to take part in an orchestra or band kind of situation and be able to be expressive and be on a level footing with their peers to as best as you can, and really be able to play and express themselves and play with everybody else. That was the kind of core initial goal, and I've seen that happen many times with Skoog. It's not necessarily the main way that it's used. I would say it's more used as a probably a developmental tool, as you say, but, to support kind of musical play, this core idea of musicality, which is really where it came from, which is, great that it is actually being used in that way to support and help people engaging with their kind of inner musician, engaging with a kind of level of musicality that is more about just kind of basic human needs and comfort and development. But the original goal, was to, and that's why in the Skoog kind of PC software, which is still the kind of same platform as we started with originally, what we've used in that, and what was always a kind of key thing, was using physical models of traditional instruments. So there's brass, woodwind, percussion, and strings in there. The reason they're in there is that specific view of being able to say, right, you're in the brass section or the string section or the woodwind section or the percussion section of the band, and let's help you be there. And actually, the first concert we did, we had two students from Hillside School in Kilmarnock, and they were playing in the brass section in Glasgow Royal Concert Hall. And they did amazingly. In a piece that Nigel Osborne wrote.
What's the most complex piece of music you've seen created on the Skoog?
The most complex piece of music would have to be Love and Money, performed by the Headspace Ensemble. You can look these guys up there. It's Clarence Adu, who was a professional trumpet player and suffered in a tragic accident, became quadriplegic. And he found his way back to music with the support of his friends, one of whom is Nigel, who's been involved. Nigel keeps cropping up all over the place, by the way. You'll find in the story of Skoog. He's quite a man. And they worked with various people, and another chap, Rolf Gelhar, who is a real pioneer in music technology, right at the cutting edge, and has been since the 60s. He got involved and created this bespoke system for the Clarence where he uses a head pointer and head tracker. And we created a platform for him then. And the piece, Love or Money, was written by Nigel for the 2012 City of London Festival. Was it 2012? I think so, yeah. And it's essentially a modern contemporary piece of music. There's a combination of things going on. There's some skooging. I don't think that the physical tactile skooging that was played by two students from the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland, and I think that bit is not in the clip that I've got recorded. But the clip is of Clarence using a breath controller to play through the Skoog software, so it's using these physical models as well, and some bespoke arrangements. But that would be the most complex. There's samples from Russian radio going on. There's some crazy horns, percussion, all sorts, trombone, and technology all kind of playing away. I think the other thing I would say, that's probably the most complex piece. It's a lot going on, but I would say the most I don't know what the right word is, but the most kind of identifiable kind of true piece of music that really is kind of a piece of music for Skoog would be a piece called Technophonia. And that was composed by Oliver Searle as a commission with Drake Music Scotland. And it was a piece based around exploring these new technologies. And it was Skoog, Soundbeam, Wave Drum, and a couple other things that they were using. And he incorporated them into an ensemble of string musicians and these four young musicians who happen to have abilities and access different ways. Stephanie Forrest was the Skoog player in that. And the amazing thing about that was, she started off, not playing an instrument. She identified with Skoog, began getting lessons in Skoog on a weekly basis, and then was performing in this ensemble as a Skoog musician, and this part, several parts. And I've got there's several recordings also we can link to of that on YouTube where you can see. And in that piece, she actually, I think, in that piece is more interesting as well, because it makes use of the kind of color coding and the use of the kind of color type score that we can produce or that you can use with Skoog. So it's a really playing off all elements. So she uses color-coded kind of blocks of color to play the specific composed melodies. She's not reading music in a traditional sense, but she's reading and playing music. She repeated the performance at the Conservatoire down in London at the like the Tate and there's other places, and they toured with it. And so, she had music, she had to rehearse, she had to practice and deliver and watch that several times. It's a beautiful, beautiful piece. So they would be my two standout points.
And have any users really surprised you with creative uses of the Skoog that even you weren't expecting?
Yeah. There's a lady that plays it with her armpit. Is a teacher of a primary school, and she does this crazy thing. She gets the kids to chase her, and she kind of squeezes it under her arm, and it goes crazy, and they love it. So in terms of physical use of it, that really surprised me. I've been surprised 3 times by having it thrown at me by students. And luckily it's soft enough, but in a kind of slightly fun way, but playing on the, kids that don't want to get involved, and you say, hey, play this, and they're like, I don't want to play it, and they maybe push it away or possibly throw it at you, and you catch it, and it makes a noise, and you toss it back, and it makes a noise. And immediately what was rejection turns into a communication and an exchange. And that then that's when you have these turning points in your relationships with students like this. And so they may have, their initial reaction may be to push it away. When they push it away, it says something back to them, or they throw it to you and it lands and it makes a sound, you give it back, and then suddenly you're into this exchange. So that's always nice and surprising. There's also the use of different sounds, and that's something that also became really important, was, understanding that in terms of, and across all elements of education, I think, particularly with engaging with those who face challenges, we have to challenge ourselves on what our perception of music or language or art or maths even is, and what it means to those users. And, not everyone needs the kind of straight rhythmic, normal kind of, normal music, as you might say. And some people want to explore some different ways of doing that and exploring different sounds. I mean, we used to do a lot of stuff with autistic students, and teachers would walk by the room and there was kind of a crazy sound coming out, which was essentially part of a big improvised mashup that we were just making sounds with these kids. They were making sounds back, and we were just totally going with it. And they'd walk past, and their faces would just be like, what is going on in there? But it would be so arresting that they'd stop, because they'd be like, what is going on in there? Sounds like someone's torturing a cat. And they'd stop and they'd listen, and then they'd sit down and they'd be kind of captivated. And there's that thing of, once you're hooked into the narrative, and it's the narrative that's so important. It's not the notes that you play, it's that you do play, right, and that you play with other people. And that's the most important thing that I think we all need to grasp around music education. Is it's, the notes don't matter so much initially. I mean, yes, when you get to doing performance stuff, and that's fine, you need to toe the line, but music is something you do with other people, and it's the fact that you do play, and you play with someone else or a group, and it doesn't matter what you play, there's that you do it. And so going back to this example, we had, in terms of surprising sounds, a student in one example, and this wasn't myself, it was another educator, a guy called Lewis. Anyway, or was it you? I have to go back and remember. But working with this group, and there's one chap, he wouldn't engage, he couldn't get him to take part in the group, but all the while, this young man was very interested by latches and locks and, handles, and he would go and play with the handle, and he was obviously listening to it. And a lot of people with various kind of challenges, they like in various sounds, whether it's scrubbing through a continuous kind of loop on YouTube, or playing with a switch, or playing with a particular buckle or toy. And what's happening there is they're creating a stable, repeating sensory environment that they manage. And by repeating and playing that sound or repeating that action over again, you create a stable environment for you to be in, when perhaps when you don't do that, you're getting really sensory overload, and it's very challenging for you. Anyway, this young guy, he loved this handle. So we thought, well, I'll record the sound of the handle and put it on the Skoog. So we did that and showed him that you could make that same sound on the Skoog, and he was intrigued, and he came over, he touched it, and we didn't pitch it initially, and just that got him hooked in. And then we began to pitch the sounds that were, started to kind of adjust the samples. So they started to make a scale, and he ended up playing a kind of percussive handle marimba or something. I don't know what you would call it. It was a very odd sound, but it was his sound. And that's, again, another thing is helping students find their own sounds. And the ability to record with the software and manipulate samples and play with voice. I mean, that's another incredibly powerful thing that you can do, not just with Skoog, but with any kind of recording device. Right. But giving those that don't necessarily have full control of their own sounds or their bodies, the ability to create and control sounds that they make. And this goes, I mentioned in the beginning, talking about, those who maybe face challenges moving and controlling movement in relation to Skoog, and particularly music and special needs. That ability to, when you don't have control of your own body and when you can't necessarily control your voice as well, you can, to be able to control a sound. And a sound in space is such a powerful thing. And I think, we can take it for granted, we, in terms of maybe you or people who can speak well and control these things. But it's an amazing thing. You make a sound and you are physically present in the space around you for everyone else to hear and interact with. When you think about it, step back from it, it's really an amazing thing. That air that comes from your lungs is physically in touch with your body, and other people can feel that. It's movement from you that is sound. It's multisensory, and it carries information, and it's at your beck and call. And we can manipulate it, make it quiet or make it loud and high and low and ooh, and do all kinds of crazy stuff with it at our will. And when you can't do that, when that is denied you, that has a massive impact on your interaction with the world, and particularly with other people. So to give people the opportunity, whether it's with Skoog or any other kind of music making device or technology, to control sound and to create it for themselves, to be able to have control over it in their environment, it's a really powerful thing. It's incredibly motivating, and it helps them gain access back to that kind of core world of musicality that we need to grow and develop and to share time with other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think that's one of the really important aspects of this. And I think that it's something that really hasn't been tapped into until just recently.
Yeah, no, and there's interesting things happening. I was early on there were some things around at the time, but I think there were more than 50 new MIDI controllers released last year. Some good, some bizarre, and the things are happening. People are saying, and it's the main thing with it, and this is the thing that shocks some people, but really seemed obvious to me, in that if it's not even if it's electronic, there's other things, but if it's an electronic interface, it doesn't, the majority of electronic interfaces until now are just electronic versions of the acoustic counterpart. It looks like a piano, or it looks like a clarinet, or it looks like a guitar. And if it's not making any sound, it doesn't have to do that. It doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be so difficult to use. The fingering doesn't have to be all kind of hold this key down while you do another. And there's elements to kind of, facilitating acoustic musicians into electronics by being able to use the skills that they have. And that's all cool. But in terms of creating some new interfaces, they don't have to, the physical acoustic instruments are the way they are because of the physics of the universe and the sounds that you're trying to make and control with them. Right. If you're not using them to make the sounds, you don't have to make it so. And so people are trying all kinds of stuff now. There's even the big companies, even Roland, they just released their, what's it called? The bizarre wind controller, which is like a hybrid between, a flute, a clarinet, a saxophone, and various other things. It's got all kinds of gadgetry going on in it. Or you've got Roly's tactile keyboard. You've got all kinds of touch interface instruments on the iPad. You've got things like Skoog. There was Alpha Sphere kicking around. There's iRig, which is the kind of cam-based device that you use, for controlling sounds. All kinds of really exciting development going on. And I think what's amazing is it's just bringing more people to music, in allowing more people to get creative at a younger age, I think. And I think that'll only benefit music as a whole in terms of what we can make and share and listen to and enjoy.
What is next for the Skoog?
What's next for Skoog? Well, there's still more functionality to add physically, is more interactivity that we can get from the device in terms of how sophisticatedly you can kind of control and map signals. I think more kind of people are asking for access to the kind of data, the kind of control stuff themselves. They want to be able just to map it how they want on the kind of tech side, and even in the education kind of world, to be able to use it for controlling different things. So all of these things are on our radar to take, as well as evolving the kind of musical capacity. And we've also got a couple of bespoke synth kind of sounds that we've been working on that we're going to be hopefully releasing very soon, that we've been working on for a while, that we alluded to in the Indiegogo. There's some stuff. I mean, that's another thing, is sometimes people ask, what does a Skoog sound like? And we always used to use it, with these emulations of acoustic instruments, because there's this whole, drive to engage in orchestras and be able to sit alongside acoustic instruments. But I think, we're actually getting close to being able to release what we feel is the real sound of Skoog, which is more of a synth hybrid thing going on that really responds to the different kind of touches. So there's that. There's connectivity in terms of Android and other kind of platforms. And we would, we're keen as we grow. We'd like to start playing with different form factors as well, and growing the family of Skoog devices, so that whilst the Cube is great and the 5 size, and it affords a level that really is an entry point for so many people and does give a range of options. But we'd like to explore different things as well, both in the hardware and the software. So we're looking into what else we can do with our kind of tactile technology, this use of this more kind of sensory touch experience to control, do different things, or do more interesting things musically.
And we have to ask, where did the name Skoog come from?
So the name, it's myself. I'm one half of Skoog, as it were, in terms of the founding 2 inventors, partners. So I'm Ben Schögler, I've got an OG in my name, OG. And my partner in crime is Dr. David Scalina. And he is the ska. So he's the ska and I'm the OG. And we stuck them together, it's literally half and half. And we thought that looks nice. But we had what was really important to us is that it wasn't a KR9 2000 or a CR. It needed to have a personality, because we had this funny cube and with these good bits and it had a personality, and it was our baby as well. It's put so much into this. So we had a few different names, and we went back to the kids in the schools we've been working with, and we asked them, and they chose Skoog. And so since that day, it's been called Skoog.
It's brilliant. It's a brilliant word. I have to say, It's so much fun to say. I said last week, if this should have been a word a long time ago.
Oh, thank you. We need to make sure we do it right, and let it have its day.
Well, it's so unique. I mean, if you Google Skoog, you come up with your device all over the place. And then I think the name of a guy who wrote a book on chemistry. And there's also a plastic surgery procedure as well, in terms of a piece of nasal surgery, I think, that has a reference to it. You can get your nose Skooged.
Yeah.
So I always thought it would be a good name for a snack as well, like something like a Skittle, but with like a gummy center.
It sounds tasty. It does, and actually, that was an issue with the original Skoog. That did get bitten quite a bit. Tasty, but the new Skoog is a much tougher coat, and the polyurethane rubber is more bite resistant. It's not bite proof yet, so you can still have a bit of a nibble.
Which, incidentally, that would be interesting, something to develop too, like a chew toy for a dog that could create music. Like we could. Yeah.
There's. I'm writing it down. There's something in that.
Instead of the jingle dogs, we got the Skoog dogs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Or even better, you could, since the manufacturer used to create stress balls, you could make a stress ball that screams when you squeeze it. That would be really therapeutic too, I feel.
Maybe load the scream of the desired. Focus.
That's right.
Onto your
Focus.
Yes, no. There's all kinds of there's fun things you can do with squeezing, and
absolutely.
It's an area to be explored, I think, on many levels.
I guess we'll let you get back to your evening.
All right, no worries. Well, look, thanks for taking the time to chat with me. And any questions, you can always get in touch with us at support at SkoogMusic.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll link to the website in the show notes, and we'll include all the video links as well.
Cool. All right.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Ben. Thanks so much for coming on.
No worries. Take care. Speak to you soon.
Okay, Ben. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
Well, that was interesting.
Yeah, it's a very unique, cool device. It's a lot of fun to play with, and it's nice to see people being able to be creative in new ways when they might not have been able to.
Well, it was really interesting hearing about the developmental side of it. I didn't even really, in playing around with it, I didn't even really think about that part of it. But yeah, that would be something just to have kids be able to create soundscapes and to create sound and control the sound like he was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I could see how that would be a very powerful thing.
Yeah, definitely.
But there's really nothing like it out there other than the Skoog, right? I guess the Beams is sort of...
Not really.
Yeah, no, it's the Beams isn't tactile like the Skoog is. The Beams is cool, and it's got a lot of it can be switch accessed. You're on the normal device itself. You're just breaking a light beam to trigger a sound.
Right.
Skoog actually lets you provide emphasis as well, as well as having that tactile interface. So.
And can you sample with the Beams?
No, I don't believe so. I'd have to double check.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I'm not sure. I know there are a bunch of samples that are included with the Beams, but I'm not sure you can import your own.
No, I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because even the sampling part of the Skoog software is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that you can sample a sound and then you can pitch it up, pitch it down, change keys, even that alone, and then tie it into any sort of MIDI. I think you can tie it into GarageBand. There's all sorts of stuff that you can actually do with the software. So the software suite itself is pretty powerful.
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
These guys are really kind of the first on the block, it seems, to doing this. So,
well, I don't know that they're the first on the block. I mean, essentially, it's a MIDI device.
Yeah.
So it's, in terms of its interface, it's not unique, but it's. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. In terms of its connectivity to other musical systems, it's not unique. But in terms of its interface, it is unique. The cube shape, the different textures, and
being able to play it with your feet, your elbow, bang it against your nose,
under your arm, as you said.
Under your arm.
Yeah.
And make it sound like a brass, woodwind, instrument. Definitely opens the doors to people with, physical
different
issues,
abilities,
different abilities. Yeah.
well, and I thought that Bill from Dancing Dots brought up a good point last week, in the sense that, now that inclusion is becoming a lot more prevalent in the schools, and we've kind of got the basics covered, now we can, I feel like stuff like music and inclusion into music is something that's growing now that the basics are covered. I don't know, what do you have any sense of that?
Well, it's really hard to say. I'm not in the education systems and kind of seeing what's going on, but it'd be really interesting to actually take a Skoog, to a school system, have somebody, sit down, play with it for a couple weeks, and be able to participate in their band or, their orchestra with the Skoog, and just see what the reaction is from the teacher, from the other students. They're seeing a lot of it in the UK being done,
Right.
but how inclusive are we here in Canada? That I don't know.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah, it's the sort of device that you would think would do really well in a school environment. Even if any school that had a band program had a Skoog, it would allow students who might not have been able to participate in band to be a part of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I mean, that would be really exciting. It would be, but I mean, I think it even goes beyond that. I mean, what I found really interesting was when he was talking about using it with autistic kids, and they were just able to hit the thing and make a sound, and and make their own sound, like the kid with the handle.
Yeah.
I could see how that could be a really powerful experience. But we should really play with ours more.
Yes, we should.
That conversation made me want to break it out and actually we should play with it more, and we should make a video of it or something.
Skoog Jam.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should.
See what we could do. So hey, we have a website, www.atbanter.com, where you can email us at
atbanterpodcast@gmail.com.
We're also available on Twitter, Facebook, Google+, YouTube, SoundCloud. Where can't you find us? We're just everywhere.
iTunes, Stitcher. Yep.
Yeah. Yep. And you can also visit the Aroga Technologies website.
Yeah, that's true. You can. It's at www.aroga.com. And while you're on there, look up a Skoog.
Absolutely. And that is going to do it for us.
I think so.
So, I've been Rob Minot.
I've been Rocky Raccoon.
I am Groot.
It's Rocket Raccoon, not Rocky Raccoon.
No, Rocky Raccoon. It's a musical theme. Beatles,
All right.
you know.
Oh, I see. All right, fine. The Rocky Raccoon Picture Show.
There
That's
you go.
right.
I'm just a sweet raccoon.
Bye.
We're losing it here. See ya.
Bye. See you next week.
This podcast has been brought to you by Aroga Technologies. Visit Aroga Technologies online at www.aroga.com. That's AROGA.com. Music provided by bensound.com.